There is a lot going on in the world that is not very good. There is a lot of violence. There is increasing poverty, destitution everywhere. And it is sad because we have all over the world created societies that are based on materialism. And materialism requires that we have a culture of violence to protect the things that we acquire. And that culture of violence eventually leads to corrupting all aspects of human life. Our relationships are corrupted and our, just all our ethics and morals and everything get corrupted. And it's that culture of violence that my grandfather talked about changing. That we have to change that culture of violence. We cannot remain satisfied that a majority of people are enjoying a good life, that it's only a minority that is not. That's not the kind of life we want. We want a life where everybody enjoys equally, not just a majority, but everybody. As long as we have even one person in our society who lives in pain and agony, we cannot remain satisfied and sit back. We have to work towards creating a good life for that person also. Which means that we have to recognize many of the faults that lie within ourselves. And there are many faults within ourselves that we ignore, and we just live with them because we are so much a part of the society that exists today. One of the things that my grandfather was very keen on teaching everybody was about anger. Now you might say, well, what is, why anger and why should one be so concerned about anger? But anger today, because it is abused, it creates more than 85% of the violence that we experience in our own personal lives or in the lives of our nation. We get angry because something happened or didn't happen, and we explode and we say things and we do things that sometimes changes the course of our lives. And so anger is a very good emotion. It's not something that we should be ashamed about. What we need to be ashamed about is the way we abuse anger. When grandfather used to say that anger to the human being is what gasoline is to the automobile. If you don't put gasoline in the automobile, it's not going to run. And if you don't have anger within you, you're not going to do all the things that you need to do. So anger is very good, but we have to learn how to channel that energy. He used to say that anger is like electricity. It's just as powerful and just as useful, but only if we use it intelligently. But it can be just as deadly and destructive if we abuse it. So just as we channel electricity and bring it into our lives and we use it for the good of humanity, we must learn to channel anger in the same way so that we can use that energy for the good of humanity rather than abuse it and cause death and destruction. For that we need a strong mind. Unfortunately, we don't have a strong mind. We don't pay much attention to strengthening our minds. We think that just going to school and learning from books or learning from the teachers is enough for us, and we don't need to do any more. But that is like getting a computer and filling that computer with all kinds of software. And if that computer doesn't have the capacity to deal with that software, it's going to crash. So filling our minds with all kinds of knowledge and not knowing how to use that knowledge or how to evaluate that knowledge, our minds crash and we end up doing wrong things. So it's essential that we get control of our minds. Now you'll find that even as you sit here while you're listening to me, your mind probably has a dozen different thoughts racing through the mind at the same time. So to that extent, your mind is distracted. You are not fully here. You are not fully listening to what I'm saying. You are distracted by many other issues. And that is natural. That happens because we have not strengthened our mind. What we need to do to strengthen our minds is what we do to strengthen our bodies. We do exercise so that we have a strong body. But we don't do any exercise to have a strong mind. And that is what we need to do. What my grandfather used to make me do was to sit quietly in a room for a few minutes every day and hold in front of me something that gave me pleasure to look at. It could be a flower or a photograph or whatever it is. Hold that object in front of you and for 1 full minute, focus your entire attention on that object. And then close your eyes and see for how long you can keep that image in your mind's eye. In the beginning you'll find the moment you close your eyes, the image vanishes. Because we didn't do the exercise and we don't know how to hold on to that image. But if we do this exercise regularly, then you'll find that you can keep that image longer and longer in your mind's eye, and to that extent, your mind comes under your control. And once your mind comes under your control, then you can stop your mind from doing silly things that are not going to be useful to anybody. Then you will be able to move away from situations and do the right thing. So it's very important that we learn this and we do these exercises regularly. But also what we need to learn is that when we talk about violence, we talk only in terms of the physical violence. The wars and the fighting and the killings and the murders and the shootings and all of these things as being violent. But we all commit many kinds of non-physical violence. What my grandfather used to call passive violence. There's physical violence and passive violence. Now, every day I had to make a tree, like a family tree. We have a grandfather and then, one son and the second son and a daughter, and then all the branches going out. In the same way, I had to make a tree of violence, with violence as the grandparent, and physical violence and passive violence as the two branches. And every day before I went to bed, I had to analyze and examine everything that I had seen or done during the day and put them down on that tree. If it was the kind of violence where physical force was used, that would go under physical violence. But if it's the kind of violence where I didn't use any physical force, and yet I hurt people by what I did, that would go under passive violence. And that could be anything. discrimination, looking down on people, you know, exploiting people, wasting resources, throwing away things. All of these little things that we do, when we know that there are people hungry, there are people living in poverty, and there are people in destitution, and yet because we have so much, we just throw it away and say, we don't need it. And that is violence. And it is that kind of violence that all of us commit that eventually leads to physical violence. So it is passive violence that fuels the fire of physical violence. So logically, if we want to put out that fire of physical violence, we have to cut off the fuel supply. And since the fuel supply comes from each one of us, we have to become the change we wish to see in the world. If it doesn't begin with us, if we cannot find that peace that we are trying to build, you can't build an artwork if you don't have the image in your mind. You first have the image in your mind, then you can build something out of that image. When you make a show, you have some image in your mind about what you want to do in that show, and then you act it out here. So you got to have an image. And on that image, then we can build. We don't have an image of peace. We don't know what peace looks like. And yet everybody wants to build peace. So first, we have to create that image of peace. And the image of peace, in my opinion, is where everybody lives in harmony with each other as human beings and with all of creation. All the trees and the animals and all of these things that have been created by the Lord are not for us to exploit. They are for us to nurture and use and renew. And it's only then we can create that harmony between everything, and we will then be able to live in peace. So I don't want to take a lot of your time. I am very happy to be here, especially happy with all of you. The three of you did a great performance. I'm really surprised. And I know you'll go a long way with your acting careers. Just keep it up and do a good job. And all the artists and everybody else who have been doing wonderful work, keep it up.
Yes.
One day things will change. Thank you.